Can you guys hear me? You can probably, right?
Yes, sir.
Good. Guys, I'm super happy for our session today, and I'm really excited for that. We have the man, the moose, the legend, Tony Dixon here. The last time I saw him was like on a really great mastermind event. We were together, and Tony is the expert for taxes and wealth preservation strategies. And I wanted to have him on because he's like really we'll talk about with us today about the three pillars that you need to protect what you built and how you avoid lawsuits, income taxes, and death taxes when something happens to you. And when I met him, he's not also the coolest CPA I ever met. Like when you think a CPA is super boring and all of that, right? And that's not Tony. He founded Advanced Tax Group 18 years ago and is supporting businesses to really do these three things, like was founding the right entities, doing tax preparation and estate planning. And his team has established over 50,000 entities, completed over 100,000 tax returns, and thousands of estate plans. And, he's teaching this. He has an amazing team. I think he has over like 42 or 45 people working for him, and he's a professional speaker. You see him on the stages of the world, and it's not that like normal that you have somebody like him on a call like this. And yeah, I'm super happy to have him here. Tony, how are you today?
Man, I'll tell you what, I am even better after that. You're making me feel good about myself.
You should always feel good about myself. Like we're the guest yesterday, one of our calls, right? Like it's not you should always feel good about yourself, and I know you do. But Tony, I gave a little introduction, but tell us a little bit. Who are you? What do you do? And how do you help people in your own words?
No, I mean, I sure appreciate that. And Robin, man, I can't express enough how grateful I am to be here with you and everybody that you got here. I'm super impressed with what you've built, what you're building, and really where this is all going. I mean, you are someone who stands behind what you do, and I've just every interaction I've had with you has just been top notch and positive, and I appreciate that about you.
Thank
You're the
you.
real deal, man. Everybody else, great to see you guys. Musaf, Glenn, Paul, Adam, Vlad. I mean, you guys are here spending time with Robin, learning from this guy and, really just kind of drinking it up. There's a lot of things you could be doing that are not this, but you've chosen to be here. So that's awesome. That speaks volumes to you guys, and I'm sure glad to be able to spend some time with you. Um, Robin, I mean, going back to your question, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm approaching 2 decades at this, and really the thing that drives me personally in building this business and what we do is a desire to have our clients, sleep better at night, wake up more confident in what they're doing and what they're building in the morning, and genuinely trying to make their lives better. And we do that through our services, and it's something that our clients don't need to talk to us about every day. In fact, sometimes our clients only talk to us a couple times a year. But at the end of the day, those conversations that we have, whether it's weekly, monthly, or just a couple times a year, we try to get the biggest impact out of those conversations with our clients to put them in a better situation to avoid lawsuits, to have safety, to save money in their taxes. If one conversation can be the difference of, paying $40,000 in taxes to the government. And so if we can have that kind of impactful conversation with someone, that's what we're going for. So if we can help you protect your wealth and grow it, that's what drives us.
I like that. I like that a lot. And if you don't mind, I mean, we have an hour with you, and I'm really grateful that you gave us an hour of your time, which is the most valuable asset we have because we don't need to pay taxes of that. We just have 24 of those a day, right? So
Sure.
um, one of the things I think people don't really think about that is how exposed they are as business owners to lawsuits, right?
Mhm.
Especially like in the real estate industry. And maybe bring us a little bit. And I know you have a presentation prepared too, but like I wanted to really stick that out because that's one of two topics which we never discussed in the group before. It's like really this. how exposed are we for liability? And the second thing I want to go a little bit later into is also this topic of estate planning. What happens when I hit a tree tomorrow? Right?
Yeah.
Like, but let's go into the lawsuit thing first. Like, what do you think are the most common like mistakes, especially real estate investors do when they just go, we're all enthusiasts, we get into the business, and we're rolling, and we're thinking about all of that. What are the things we don't think about from like a legal perspective?
Totally, man. I mean, that's such a good question because it's one of those things where, as a business owner, depending on where you're at in this journey, because that's what it is it? It's a journey, and it's the daily experience, the daily decisions that we're making in business. And ultimately, we're doing it to become profitable. The goal is make more money than you spend or lose. And so, in the process of doing that, a lot of people, especially the really good entrepreneurs, get so laser focused on just like being the lead dog, driving the new trail, figuring things out and making it so it works, that sometimes you don't realize the wake behind you. And you start acquiring these assets and you start acquiring, building businesses and hiring people. Things start to grow. Next thing you know, you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, we've got like an organization here. We've got liabilities. We've got assets that are attached to us personally. What happens is that's a it's it what we call this is the prosperity paradox. Okay. This is something that we've coined, but basically what happens is when you start, you don't really, it's easy because, what are you trying to protect? Maybe your personal house, cars, bank accounts. You have your assets, you have your family. The thing that's most important to you, whatever that may be, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your things. You're like, all right, how do I protect this stuff? If it's your house, you put locks on the door. You put locks on the door to protect the things inside, whether they're the actual things or the people. Well, the challenge that you run into is a lot of people, when looking at a security system, most security systems go in after someone's been burglarized. It's only after something happens they're like, oh, shoot. It brings awareness to them where they're like, probably should do something about this. And that's kind of in our opinion, it's kind of the wrong way to think about that. Because what happens is, you know, you should prepare. You buy fire insurance before your house is on fire. And so to do that, the first thing that you can do is to avoid lawsuits is set up an LLC, set up some sort of a legal structure. And it is literally the bare minimum that anyone can do in business is have some sort of legal structure that you can funnel those businesses in to create a barrier between you and the business. Now, going back to what I was saying about the prosperity paradox, is I'm not sure where everybody's at in their journey, but once you start finding success and get a little bit more success and buy another property, some more land, make a little bit more money, what happens is someone will start with a single LLC to protect their business, and their assets grow, their wealth grows, and what happens is there's this chasm between the assets that they have and the protection that they have for those assets and the businesses that they build. And there's this chasm between it. The protection doesn't match the holdings and the asset and the estate. And so a lot of the times when we come into a conversation with someone, we're saying, all right, where do you stand right now? What are you doing? Does it make sense to just have one LLC, or does it make sense to start breaking these things up so you can put your exposure, your legal exposure into smaller buckets? It comes down to, we always tell our clients, how do we make it look like you don't own anything or do anything? We want to
Mhm.
make sure that your exposure, the target on your back is as small as possible. And you do that by
Mhm.
isolating your assets from each other, by putting them into different LLCs or companies, and then insulating them from each other. So if something were to happen, because in the world of business and owning assets, something can happen, you're insulating them from each other. And so the biggest exposure that we see is someone getting so focused and driven on building the business that they forget to protect the assets along the way. They forget to shore up this structure that they are actively building until it gets too late and they're overexposed with what they're doing.
Yeah, I understand. And it's like as a German, like coming to America, the land of American dreams, right? Like of dreams, and you can do whatever you want. What I learned pretty quickly is like every lawyer can dream of a lot of things to sue you, right? And when I think about that, like what I learned a couple of things in the hard way is you're exposed to a lot of liability for whatever you do. It's owning assets. It's like, hey, you do text messaging, you probably have a litigator on your list. You're doing, I don't know, whatever. Suddenly somebody sues you for whatever. Does that make sense? And I think a lot of people don't think about that because they're not aware. And another thing I see very often is you know, what do I need to do? Like, even when I have an LLC, to keep this corporate veil up, right? Like, there's a corporate veil, like, which just like is the boundary, from my understanding, between the business and you personally, right? And that's the protection seal, and you don't want to mix that up. Can you give us a little bit, like, what do you see? What people do? Like the big three biggest mistakes maybe people do there, or what do they don't they do that they should do, right? To keep that
Sure.
really up and tight.
Yeah, the corporate veil is it's an interesting topic because, we've probably all heard it, but we all know we shouldn't pierce it. You hear about it, but it's one of those things where you're like, well, don't mess with it. You don't want that to be broken. So effectively, the corporate veil is this separation between you personally and the business. And really honoring that separation is where protection comes from. And so when you set up an LLC or a corporation or a partnership, what you're doing, the legal definition ultimately comes down to saying an LLC is an artificial person. You're basically creating a new person, and that new person can sign contracts. It can take on its own liabilities. It will file its own taxes. It can have its own bank account. It can have its own credit score. This artificial person is separate from you. Where someone pierces, and that's what that corporate veil is. That corporate veil is the distinct separation of entity, the LLC, versus human entity, you. Okay, so you have business entity and human entity. Well, what happens is when someone runs the LLC as themselves or treats the bank account and the money in the business as their own personal piggy bank, there is no delineation between business money and finance versus personal money and finance. There is no clear record keeping or paper trail. You're really an extension of you. You have pierced the corporate veil in that scenario. So if you don't actually treat it as truly a separate third party, you have pierced the corporate veil. If you are just pulling money out for whatever you want, you're piercing the corporate veil. If you're fluidly using personal finance and business finance and back and forth, like let's say, for example, if you have your business bank account that has money in it from business transactions that you legitimately made as a business, but then you're using that business debit card, credit card, or check to go to the store and buy, tonight's dinner for yourself personally. Or, you're using it to buy a big screen TV for personal use of the house directly out of the business bank account. You're piercing that corporate veil. Like what's happening is in the court of law, there is no distinction between you and the LLC. And so the best thing that you can do is truly keep things completely separate. Separate bank accounts, separate finances, have a separate debit card attached to the business bank account, have separate credit cards specifically for the business. Be very conscious about the expenses that you're spending money on for the business versus personal. If you do need something personally, transfer that money from the business to a personal account and then spend the money through a personal account. Don't give the IRS or any government agency a reason or an excuse to think that you are just an extension of the LLC or vice versa. And that's the biggest thing. So, taking steps like building a credit score for the LLC, having separate phone numbers and addresses and things like that, bank accounts for sure. All of this stuff establishes and solidifies the idea that your LLC is not you. It stands on its own.
Like that. I like that. Thank you for lining that out. Um, I know you've prepared a little bit, you want to just pull out whatever you got and like then we're gonna take it from there because I have like so many questions. I don't want to take anything up front.
Honestly, I'm good either way, man. We can just rattle through questions. I can go through. So I mean, we have a lot of information about taxes and some great ways people can write off expenses and save money through their taxes. I'm happy to go through that, but I'm fluid, man. Like if we got questions specifically from you or the group, we can do that as well.
Let's do like a little Q&A in the end. Maybe let's take the fifth last 15, 20 minutes and
Sure.
walk us a little bit through like, the most necessary things you should do when somebody is like not there making millions already, but when we're on the way to there, like what would we need to do from this like triangle of like taxes, of like legal protection, of like estate planning too, right? Because when you have a family, it's super important that you have that piece in place for multiple reasons. Like what happens when something happens to you, to your family? Was that what you own, right? Are the proper security systems in place, right? A lot of people don't think about that.
100%. 100%. And that's the thing. It's like there's so many different things that you can be doing to protect yourself. And it's not a one size fits all. One thing that I will say is, you're going to have a standard answer where everyone can benefit from certain things. Like, setting up if you're running a business, setting up an LLC is a great place to start if you haven't even done that. Filing taxes and doing that effectively is going to be a big thing. Setting up a trust, but what we find is that it's so important to protect yourself from lawsuits, because what we find is one out of every four people at some point will be sued, and the best way to address that, because to your point, we live in a litigious society. People can sue for anything. Hot coffee, cold French fries, text messages they didn't want to receive. I mean, it's endless. It's a double-edged sword with the society that we live in that has so much structure and so much infrastructure that it also comes with rules and regulations. And it's easy to be on one side or the other depending on what you're trying to do. So protecting yourself with LLCs and legal structures is always step one. And then your need for additional businesses will grow from there. Um, Now, one out of every four people at some point will be sued to some degree. But a less encouraging statistic is four out of every four people will have to deal with taxes. You're every single person has to deal with taxes, and it will be a year in and year out thing. And that's one of the things that maybe I can share a little bit of information after this to dive into some strategies that you guys can use in real time. But another sobering statistic is four out of four people will die. Now, Robin, this isn't usually my motivational part of the presentation or a conversation, but I promise every single person on this call, you're going to die at some point, and that is the reality that we have to face. And that's where having a legacy plan, I've got children, and I'm working hard and I want them to benefit from that to some degree, whether they take over the business or that our assets pass on to them, and so having a plan in place is so key. And that's where setting up a trust, a revocable living trust is really the most common thing that you could do to begin with, and then grow and expand from there depending on sophistication and need. But that plan for a trust, if something were to happen, Robin, you'd said like, what happens if you hit a tree, and today's your day, and that's it. Well, the problem you're going to run into is if you don't have a plan in place, guess who sets that plan up for you? It's the government. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't feel super comfortable with the idea of the government coming in and deciding what happens to their children, their assets, their holdings, their businesses. And they'll do their best to make some fair assessments, but that process takes time, it takes money. You hear story after story of individuals, especially very wealthy individuals, who never set up their estate plan. You know, one of the more prominent ones was Prince, the musician. He had an estate worth $300 million, but didn't have a trust or an estate plan in place. And so it took the court system what was it, 6, 7 years to go through that what's called
Wow.
probate. Um,
Yeah.
it's nuts, and guess who pays for that time? Because you have all of these government assigned officials, the judges, the lawyers, to take them through probate. The judge on the Prince case basically made a statement of, "Hey, listen, I'm willing to listen to anyone who feels like they have a claim to this estate. Bring it if you feel like you have a claim, bring it to me." And guess how many people showed up? Dude, there was like 40.
323.
Exact right. No, there was like 40 or 50 people who showed up. They're like, "Yo, I'm a child, an illegitimate child, a cousin, a brother, twice removed, this or that." And so what happened was they had to go through this probate process to determine who had the rights to his music and assets and all of this stuff. Well, to pay for all of that, they had to start liquidating assets from the estate itself to cover those probate costs. The problem with this particular case was when they finally came to the conclusion of who was next in line or the heir to the estate, it took so long that that person passed away. So they had to start over and do it again. And they had to go to the next person in line. And so it just kept eating up that estate. And so, you know, that's the plan that will be enacted when you die if you don't actually have a plan for yourself. And that plan is put together when you actually build your trust or your estate plan. And so that's really why that estate plan is so important. Now, I'd love to open it up for any questions if you guys have any questions right off the bat. If not, one of the things that I can do for you guys is, we work with clients all over the United States to protect their wealth, set up entities, taxes, estate planning. We actually have a number of strategies that I can share with you guys if you'd like when it comes to things that you can start doing right now as business owners to save money on your taxes. I can share that with you, or if you guys have questions, I can answer those directly for you as well. Do you guys have a preference? Right on. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and share my presentation with you guys. Just go over some strategies that you guys can use. If at any point you guys have some questions, feel free to interrupt me at any point, and I'd be more than happy to jump into that with you. Robin, good to have you back, buddy. We
I'm so sorry. Like my internet gave up. Just
did it have an
decided to
estate plan?
disconnect, but I'm, huh?
Did your internet have an estate plan? It
Yeah,
just died on you.
fortunately, it just died on me, and fortunately, it came back. Right, it was resurrected here. Right,
There we
that's a
go.
great thing. Right. Um, yeah. Super sorry for that. But I think I missed the most important part. But like where back I was Prince, like how many people were it? I'm just like figuring it out. I should Google it probably after this, right? Like how many people showed up?
Yeah, there was somewhere between 40 and 50 people that staked a claim on that. And it took
Oh,
years. It took years to finalize this whole thing. And it cost millions of dollars of the estate because the estate had to pay for all of those different people that were involved, from the judges to the court appointed individuals. And so, the actual value of the estate was not what actually got passed on at the end of it. They had to, that's
yeah.
the problem with probate. Someone has to pay for that stuff, and those fees come out of the estate itself.
So, like when I think about that, guys, right? We talk a lot about like acquisitions right now and how can I add value to people. Guys, when you have older people on the phone, right? Make them aware that do you guys have your estate planning down, right? Like when they plan, oh, I'm gonna keep it for the family. Okay, hey, do you have your estate planning down? Like because when there's probate involved and all that, like your whole plan goes down the river, right? Like this way. Can you bring us a little bit in the picture? Because I got that question the other day from somebody. Hey, what's the difference between like estate planning and a trust and a will? What is like really the difference between that? What do I need to know about this?
No, it's a good question, Robin. So when you're talking about setting up a trust, there's like 60 different versions of trusts that you can set up.
Hmm.
So you have land trust, you have personal asset trusts, you have revocable trust, irrevocable trusts, charitable remainder trust, business trust. So there's all kinds. You can even get nuance like gun trusts and things like that. And so, there are all kinds of
That
trusts.
just exists in America, a gun trust, right? Like this is
Exactly.
existing nowhere else, right? Like, yeah, what did
Exactly.
you
I
say?
mean, it's
But
insane.
but Glenn has one for sure. I'm pretty sure Glenn is the
Glenn's
shooter.
got
I
one,
know that.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, there's all kinds of trusts. Now, estate planning is the practice of actually identifying what your assets are and what all of your things are, whether they have monetary or sentimental value, and creating the plan in which, as far as what's going to happen with them. And so it's basically creating, a plan of action. And so a lot of people get caught up on this idea of estate planning because they think, they have these grand visions of what an estate is. It's a mansion with a large a big yard, with sports cars and thoroughbred horses and art collections and all kinds of fancy, expensive stuff. The reality is everybody has an estate. So if you have one home, your personal home, if you own a bank account, a retirement account, if you have kids, the reality is you have an estate. And so, as far as actually getting something like that put together, coming up with a plan on what needs to happen to those things is the process of estate planning. And so, in going through the estate plan, you're going to build what's called a trust. We'll use the revocable living trust as an example. It's like a family living trust. The trust has multiple components of it, and it's going to be, one of those components is a will, your last will and testament. It's going to have what's called your Schedule A, which is a list of all of your assets. It's going to have your directives. What do you want to happen medically if you're in a situation where, you're incapacitated? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want to not be resuscitated? Do you want to donate, your organs or whatever those plans are? These are the directives medically and financially that you'll map out. What happens to the money, how to find it, who's control of it, what do you want to happen to you? You're going to have your power of attorneys in the trust, who's in charge of the money, who's in charge of the finance, who's in charge of you medically. So you're going to have financial and medical power of attorney, financial medical directives. In the trust itself, you don't even have to have the same person do all of these things. In fact, most people don't want the same person being in charge of the medical power of attorney or directives as the financial power and attorney and directives. They're saying, hey, listen, if I'm in a situation where it's pull the plug or not pull the plug, I don't want the same person who pulls the purse strings or hasn't control of the money to also be in charge of whether they pull that plug or not. And it's one of those things where it's almost like checks and balances, that they put into place. And so sometimes they'll say, hey, I'll have my daughter be in charge of the medical directives and my son be in charge of the financial or vice versa. But going back to what you were saying on the trust and the will is an interesting one because one of the biggest things that we run into is people will say, well, I've got a will, so I'm good. Well, the will is a really good place to start, but it does not prevent probate. So if you have a will in place, you will still go through probate, when you die, where you won't, but your family will, or the heirs will. And so a will does not prevent it. What it does is it gives the court system basically directions of what your wishes were. And so one of the things I like to explain to clients on the difference between a will versus a trust, a will is like if you decide, hey, listen, Robin, I want to go make a bunch of cookies, chocolate chip cookies. They're delicious. And we have the best recipe. Great. The will is the recipe. It's all the instructions on how to make the cookies. But if I were to just be like, here you go, and I handed you that recipe, that does not give you a hot plate of delicious cookies. It just gives you an idea of how to do it. You still have to go through the process of making the dough and turning on the oven and all of the steps to ultimately get the end result. That is what the trust is all about. So the will is the recipe. The end result and the enjoyment of the cookies is that entire process of baking them and cooking them and letting them sit and then consuming them. That's the trust.
I've got a question, Tony. Does the trust take the place of a will in any way, shape, or form, or no?
So it's an interesting question. I'm going to say no because a, a trust, part of a trust is the will. So it's
Well,
almost
that
like,
yeah,
yeah, so
that,
it's like you can't if you are walking around with just holding a steering wheel, it's like, well, do I have a car? Well, no, you just got a steering wheel. You're looking like a weirdo walking around with a steering wheel. If you buy a car, you're never going to buy a car without a steering wheel, right? It comes with a
yeah,
steering wheel. So
right.
that's so it's like that's what it really is like.
Okay, and then on the trust, I just happen to have mine here. I actually created it a few years ago. I've got a revocable trust,
Let's
and
go.
I was wondering on the schedules because I'm, adding to the portfolio, and I created the trust on my own. I read a book, so maybe I'll send it to you, and you can say yay, nay, or whatever we have to do to fix something. But um, my question is, because I'm adding properties that I want to keep for, my son or whatnot, every time you edit the Schedule A, do I go back to the notary and do it all over again with the new date, with the new Schedule A, or is it an addendum? Like, how does that work?
Well, I guess first question is do you like that attorney? Do you
The
want to spend
attorney?
time with them? Do you want to give them money every time you do that?
No, no, I did it all on my own. I didn't use an attorney. I'm saying when you get it notarized, to the
Yeah.
actual trust itself.
So when it comes to the trust, and I'm pulling your leg because really what happens is when you set up a trust is a snapshot in time. It's a reflection of what you hold, all of your assets, and how you feel about those assets in that moment, at that exact time you notarized it. And
Right,
so what happens is the reality is what you own and the assets that you have will change. You're going to set up more LLCs, you're going to sell assets. Maybe you really like your son this year, but you like your daughter better next year. Those things
right,
change, and then so how you address your estate and those assets is fluid. You're human. The goal here is to grow and acquire more stuff. So those assets are going to change on your Schedule A. So it is going to be very important every couple years to update your trust. And so,
yeah,
we typically suggest every 2 years on average, or
okay,
at major purchases or sales or life changes, marriages, divorces, things like that.
right.
In the meantime, you have what's called your pour over will. So do you have a pour over will in all those documents?
No, and that's why, well, I don't know. I have to read through it, but I don't recall
Maybe.
having read about that. So,
Okay, so a pour over will is an interesting tool because what happens is, let's say you set this trust up 5 years ago. Whatever assets were on the trust 5 years ago that were notarized, if you died right now and have acquired assets along the way that were not part of the original notarized document,
got it. Yeah,
the
nice.
assets before that were notarized will not be subject to probate. All of the assets after are subject to probate. So
Got
a
it.
pour over will in a trust gives you the freedom to add to your trust in between updates to protect those assets from being part of probate.
God,
And
that's
so
a good one. Yeah, I like it. Okay.
what you do is when you go update it with an attorney, you give them your old trust with the pour over will. They update it all to reflect on the new Schedule A, and then your trust is updated again for the new snapshot in time.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for explaining that. I learned something today.
My job here is done.
Give us a little insight. I mean, like we talked about the death situation now, but there's also like a liability protection through a trust in some form, right? Like, I mean, like you always hear, hey, I need a trust and a holding company, and like my
So
LLC
like
should
it,
be under that, and all that stuff. What is a trust really doing to help me when I get sued that nobody can go after that what I own, like, or what the
that's
trust owns? Probably
yeah,
that's the
that,
fine definition.
that
Can
that's like
you bring us a little bit up to speed on that?
the layering, right? You want to have the LLC control the trust, and then the trust controls the assets. Is that
First
right?
in line, first in time, right? First in line, first in time.
That's right. Yeah, and so, basically what you're going to find is, our model that we teach our clients at ATG is, set up your trust, and it's typically a revocable living trust. The revocable living trust owns a Wyoming holding company. We choose Wyoming because Wyoming is a privacy state. They don't share their owner information to public record. They have the best laws in the nation when it comes to protecting assets back and forth between the individual and the business. And so, that is where it all kind of the hub of business ownership. And then that Wyoming holding company is assigned to the trust. And then the Wyoming Holding Company owns the active operating LLCs in the various states that you run your businesses in. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are buying land in Florida. Well, it's best to set up an LLC in Florida to own that land in Florida. Okay. Now you're subject to the laws of the community and the state that you're in. So set up a Florida LLC, buy the Florida land. That Florida LLC is owned by the Wyoming Holding Company, and then that Wyoming Holding Company flows up into your trust. Okay, and then you just rinse and repeat. Say you go buy a rental property in Texas, Texas LLC, owned by the Wyoming Holding Company, up to the trust. And that's something that you can do across the United States, very easily repeated, simplifies taxes, but also gives you this layered asset protection. Because if someone looks up the land, they see it's owned by an LLC in Florida or Texas. If they look up the Florida or Texas LLC, they see it's owned by a Wyoming holding company. They look up that, there's no name on public record. And so what happens is it gives, what it does is it cuts out a lot of the frivolous lawsuits, creates a scenario where you don't have this big target on your back because you have multiple assets and holdings all over the place.
Yeah, and the other thing it does is it dilutes the monies for the attorneys to continue to charge their clients to come and figure out who you are and who this trust belongs to. And so sometimes by the time they don't even have the money to find you because they don't have it to give the attorneys to do the research to find the trust, right?
Correct. It is a deterrent. Now, if there's a real lawsuit, then and you have to submit paperwork and information, then through court order, you turn it all over. But it typically is preventing it from getting to that level. Now,
Right.
there's also this unique rule in Wyoming that's called charging order protection rights. Charging order protection rights prevent, like, say, for example, if you got sued on one of your LLCs or you got sued personally, for example, you're driving your personal car on the weekend, you hit that tree, or hit another car and they sue you personally. Well, what happens is if it's running through a Wyoming holding company, and you lose that lawsuit, what happens is that lawsuit, that settlement, the judges cannot go in and force you to start selling assets to cover those settlements and lawsuits. So it protects you personally to the businesses. And then in the business side, let's say you lose a lawsuit. Well, again, what happens is it retains that lawsuit into that one LLC, which allows you to have time, especially if you have it set up in a way where there's lien holders involved. It gives you time to be able to, move other assets around to where it's not going to affect the rest of what you're doing. So it's a really solid structure. Now, Robin, going back to what you had asked about asset protection, our model is how do we increase your security system, your asset protection around your wealth? Trusts are a unique structure because there's so many different types of trust you can set up. Not all of them are designed to protect you from liability protection. So I'll give you an example. You set up trusts. Well, back up. You set up LLCs and partnerships and corporations to protect yourself from lawsuits. Okay, that's where you protect yourself from other people and lawsuits and things like that. You set up a trust, like a revocable living trust, to protect yourself from the government. This is that probate process. That's if you're using a revocable living trust. Now, if you want to start saying, hey, my net worth is high enough, my asset holdings are vast enough to where I'm now at a level where I want to start getting asset protection not only through my LLCs, but also through the trust. there are a number of trusts that you can start tapping into to get that level of protection. And it's different from the revocable living trust. So this is when you start dealing with business trusts, irrevocable trusts, or an irrevocable trust is basically an unchangeable trust, versus the revocable or changeable living trust. The revocable trust is typically more popular because it gives you freedom to still control and run the business, access the assets. The irrevocable trust, Robin, to your question, gives a higher level of asset protection in exchange for you giving up a level of control of the assets. So if you want that level of control, of level of asset protection in the level of trust as well, you do have to, it's like an exchange. It's like, I'll give you this if you give me that. Does that make sense?
That makes
So
total sense. That makes total sense. So generally, the first layer is always having the LLC for your liability
absolutely.
protection, right? What you want to have by times probably today is like set up any kind of a trust, right? Ideally with you because you know how to do that, or read a book like Paul and come to Tony later, right? Like
Exactly.
that's
I love
that's the
it.
thing. And when you're Glenn, you want to probably know how to set up a gun trust, right? Like so this is like
Exactly.
what it is. You know, talking about, and by the way, that was really great information. I have one last question for you because I know your reality is you're a tax expert too, right? You can talk about these three things all day long. One question I have written down, I wanted to ask you, what can we do today? Give us like five things in the next, or that we can do immediately to save some taxes on our 2025 tax return. Like five little things nobody's thinking about.
Yo, okay. Well, I mean, let's go. I mean, the reality is there's so many things you can be doing. So like I guess anybody here, does everybody here on this call have at least an LLC set up for yourselves?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Oh,
And I want to talk to you about that a little bit, but we'll answer Robin's question and I'd like to follow up with that.
Hey, my
sure.
stupid question is the last question, right? Before we open it up to Q&A, and Tony will answer then all your questions, guys, because I had enough opportunity to ask him, right?
Fair enough.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, Robin, is it cool if I share my screen real quick?
Just do it.
All
Can you
right.
do it, or do I need to give you permission for that?
Let me
I'm not the
share.
host, so you can just do it. Just go.
I can just do it. All right. Well, I'll
Yeah,
do this so I can answer this question super, super quick. Let's see if we got here. So basically what we do is we help clients find strategies. How about I share 7 strategies with you real quick? And I will do this in 5 minutes or less. Does that work?
I love that. 5 minutes or less to save thousands in taxes. That's a good deal, right?
So we're all about making sure that the system's not stacked against you. What we've
Mm.
found is that the tax system is actually stacked against those who are unprepared. Tax deductions are not necessarily found, they're created. So the way the wealthy are saving money in their taxes is they're creating the tax savings in their own taxes. And so, I'm going to go over a handful of strategies real quick. I'm happy to give you guys more information on this anytime. But basically, what we found is that these strategies apply to you if you're a business owner. We're all about taking the lid off of your wealth. And that's through lawsuits, income taxes, death taxes. I'm going to jump right into these 7 strategies. Let me get right here. Uh, Basically, these are the strategies. Number one that you can do if you have children, you can hire your kids. Okay. This strategy, and these strategies may or may not apply to you. You have to have kids for this strategy to work for you. We're going to talk about strategies that require you to own real estate. If you don't have real estate, they don't work for you. If you don't have kids, you can't use this strategy. But if you do, and you're a business owner, there's a really good chance you can do this. But the IRS has a law that you could pay your kids up to $14,600 through your business in exchange for real work. Now, it's obviously work that they can do. They have to be at least 7 years old or between 7 and 20, basically, dependents. And this is per child. The way this works is you can pay your children that money. They get it tax free because it's under the tax threshold of them preparing taxes and paying taxes on it, but you still get the tax deduction. So your business writes it off. So, for example, if you had two kids, $14,600, that's $29,000 a year in tax savings or in payment that you can pay to your kids. Keep the money in your family. So your kids, it goes into their accounts. Maybe it's their bank account. You reinvest it into their retirement, but that's money staying in your family. You get the $8,500 business deduction against your business income. And so you're immediately saving money that way. So hiring kids, huge benefit. Not enough people use it. It is IRS approved, totally legal. Keeps the money in the family. Another rule, the Augusta rule. Okay, this is another one that if you're a business owner, you can actually rent your house out to your business up to 14 non-consecutive days a year, tax-free. So the way this law works is as a business owner, you may have to run business meetings, corporate events, training sessions. They have to be somewhere. Instead of renting them from a hotel, conference room, event center, find a comparable rate and have your business. You can basically rent your house to your business because, like we've established, the LLC is a totally separate entity. You're treating it like a third party, right? It's not you. You're not piercing that corporate veil. So you can rent your house out to this new business or a business that's holding a company retreat. You can do that up to 14 days a year. What happens is, let's say you do it 10 days at $1,000 a day, your business would pay you $10,000 tax free. You don't have to pay personal taxes on that money. Your business gets that as a tax deduction. So that's another $2,000-3,000 worth of tax savings in reducing your tax bill. Okay, so the Augusta rule, awesome strategy, not enough people use it. Another one, self-insured medical reimbursement plans as a business owner. Basically, what happens is you are self-insured, you pay the bills, your business reimburses you back tax-free. So let's say you have a $1,000 medical bill that you're paying for insurance. You submit that back to your business. Your business gets to pay you $1,000 without you being taxed on it. And your business gets the $1,000 deduction. So another way to transfer money from your business to you tax-free. Okay, so there's another $6,300 in savings roughly a year. What can you deduct? This is going to be stuff like dental, vision, chiropractic, premiums, copays, prescriptions, stuff like that. Let's see what else we got here, guys. This is one that you're not going to find in the tax code. This is something that we preach. This is the DGIS strategy. It's a discretionary entity jurisdiction income shifting strategy. That's a mouthful, right? But because we have a background of entity structuring and taxes, this is just a fancy way of us saying you're going to be income shifting with multiple entities. Using multiple entities to say this entity owns the asset and then another management company does all the business. This helps us support this own nothing, do nothing rule. And I'll give you an example of where this happens in practice in real life. Walk into any hotel, call it a Marriott hotel. You're going to see one sign that says this hotel is operated by Marriott. And then another sign that says this hotel is operated by XYZ Management Group. Marriott owns the building. They own the asset, but they don't do any of the work. The management business doesn't own the asset, but they do all the work. And so what happens is you're able to income shift. You're able to say one business is actually generating the income while shifting through lease payments or royalties to other LLCs so you can maximize tax strategies. You don't have to have all of your money run through one entity and get taxed at a super high tax rate. You can effectively change some of these tax rates that you have and reflecting the amount of deductions you can take from them. Typically, we see another $1,500 on give or take, from a savings like this. Home office deductions. This is a huge one, guys, and I'm going to give you a pro tip on this one. Basically, with a home office expense, you have to take a percentage of the space you use for the home office compared to the total square footage of the house. So, let's say you're getting, normally, let's say it's 2,500 square foot house and you're taking, 500 square feet. That's 20% of the total house. Okay. And then you get to take all your expenses and take that deduction. Well, that those expenses end up saving you a couple $1,000s annually by using the home office expense. Here's a pro tip that most CPAs will not tell you. The way you calculate the percentage is based off of square footage, but the way the tax code is actually written allows you to eliminate commonly used hallways and passageways, meaning you can then start eliminating hallway square footage and commonly used routes that you use to get to that home office. So you no longer have to base it off of a 2,500 square foot house. You base it off of a 2,000 square foot house, which means instead of taking 20% of the deductions, you're not taking 25% of the deductions. So it increases the amount you can write off on the home office expense. So that's a huge one. Most CPAs won't go to the extra effort to do that. You can do depreciation on your home office as well. So, if you're in real estate and you're doing cost seg studies on rental properties and things, you can also do it with the home office, getting depreciation. Retirement is a huge one. This is awesome in so many ways because not only can you as a business owner contribute larger amounts as a business owner, up to $69,000 a year, and take the tax deduction to offset taxes, but you can then also, in many cases, if you're doing it that way, depending on the plan you have, reuse that money to reinvest back into land and real estate and grow that portfolio that way as well. So that's going to be a huge one as well. So let's see, just as an example, the stuff that I just talked about, those 7 strategies, let's say you're making $200,000 a year and the entity strategy is another one. Sorry. Let's say you're making $200,000 a year. If you are an LLC, you're going to pay about $30,000 in self-employment taxes. If you convert it to an S corp and use the S corp strategy, it's going to lower that down and you're going to save $18,000 a year in taxes because you're no longer paying self-employment taxes on the entire amount, just a smaller amount. So all of those things that I just talked about, guys, those 7 strategies, let's say you were making $200,000 a year, your savings is about $54,000 a year in taxes, just on those 7 strategies alone I just shared. Over 5 years, it's $250,000, more than you made in that any one given year. So from that standpoint, there's some really cool strategies that you can tap into. So I think I went over 5 minutes on that one. Sorry, Robin.
I think it was 7.5, but I mean, who doesn't like saving taxes, right? Like, so that was really brilliant, man. You know, I think there's so much you can do, and when you guys really like, I mean, 2025 is ending, 2026 tax season is coming, right? When you're thinking that you will die one day and you don't have your estate planning done, right? I mean, any day, like whatever. Just reach out to Tony and discuss these things with him and his team. It's a really knowledgeable team. Like my wife and I are engaging him right now too. So guys, he's a good person to work with. He's full of knowledge and he's just like yeah, just being around him is good. So hey, can we drop a link somewhere like how to reach you, Tony, here in this call? And yeah, that's over there. And I'm sure we have that in our email marketing that all the people that are watching this after that, and we put that under the little videos everywhere, that is there too. But with that said, thank you so much for spending all this time with us. And what I want to do now, I want to give you the opportunity for showing up here to talk with Tony directly. If you have still a couple of minutes, but I think so, right?
I got time. Yeah, that's why I'm here, guys.
Let's do it.
Adam, I think you had a question about
Yeah.
your entity, right?
Yeah. So let's just say that I understood the concept of the corporate veil. I set up an LLC some years ago, but things happened. Things got messy. So, if you want to hit the reset button, I was working on a few other projects where I would needed an IBC and was looking at a personal interest foundation out of the Seychelles, kind of to nest with that IBC, International Business Company. That's for you guys, like a Hong Kong company. I was doing some investing and trading overseas. So I had some other business projects where there's like intellectual property. And so I was kind of looking more of it a top down. Now, what I currently have, it's my understanding that I can sell the intellectual property of this company to a new entity. And then if I structure the new entity properly, in a nutshell, it should go with the whole first in line, first in time. That is the way the corporate veil should work, my understanding of it. So like, for instance, let's say if I had a trust, and then you would have to either, like in my case, I would either have to, or to buy, let's say, just open an S corp, for instance. I would either have to buy a shell company and move, or I could just start over and then start from layering with an LLC, then an S corp. That's the operational arm of the company. You see what I'm saying? So like preventing the piercing of the corporate veil is important, but now when you're dealing with somebody that already has, what do you do?
And you're saying something that, well, I guess the question for me is, what's the goal? Like, what are you trying to do? And why are you moving away from some of the old asset entities and trying to move it into the new?
Well, I think part of it is because there was intermingling of funds from personal and business. And let's just say that if either a person or wanted to come against you or a government would like to come against your business operation, if you set up an IBC or a personal interest foundation, or a trust, and then created a new entity. Let's just say that I incorporated my company, let's say in the U.S. Virgin Islands, as I'm operating in U.S. territory, but it's not a Florida company. I'm in Florida. But let's just say that I move all of my branding, my name, everything, that the goodwill of the company,
Yep.
and moved it, restructured it over there. And let's just say, what if the IRS came at me and said, "Hey, you messed up this, and that they want to shut down and seize your bank accounts." But let's just say that I begin new operations under a new flag and move everything, and I still get to keep the goodwill of the company, but they can deal with me personally. Let's just say that, you want to control everything, but not own you don't have it in your name, kind of thing. So future assets, let's just say I'm going into a big business cycle. I know there's going to be a lot of growth, but there's a lot of mess that happen along the way. So it's more of an future asset protection strategy, and also to be able to keep operating as a business operator. You see what I mean?
Yeah, when it comes to setting up and running businesses, look at it like credit. If your personal credit takes a ding, you get a collection, you file bankruptcy, you miss a payment, that has a negative mark on your credit. Now you can fix your personal credit. Your personal credit is fluid, scores go up and down. You can have
Yeah.
things will drop off after so many years. A business's credit history, once it happens, it happens. You're not fixing business credit history. So that's why you
Actually,
want
you
to.
could start building it, because if your personal credit's bad, maybe when you start to do the new entity, you can start working. Even if you bought a shell entity, and you start a new DMB number Dun and Bradstreet, and you start building company credit. Let's just say if like a person decided they wanted to file a bankruptcy
Mhm.
and then start operating and creating more wealth over here, but it doesn't really show, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
so I guess the reason I go down that path is, if you have a new business venture or you see potential growth in something else that you're doing and you're worried about maybe some of the old stuff that has happened,
Yeah.
old business decisions, whatever the case may be, setting up a brand new LLC or company to have a fresh start from a new business standpoint, you're setting up a new artificial person. If you don't want the old stuff to spill over, if you have the ability to set up a new business, start fresh, create new bank accounts, create a new business, even if it's in the same industry, but you set up a new business, like that's like, if you don't want the old stuff to flow through, set up a new company. Now, I can't, I mean, when you start dealing with government agencies with the three letters, that's when it
Yeah.
it's a
I'm
little
not.
dicey. And, you want to obviously stay on the up and up, and they've got massive budgets and resources, and you know, you just want to make sure that you're not messing with them. So yeah,
No,
dude.
but
Um,
I'm just saying, like, if I arbitrarily decided to hit the reset button and do it right for the benefit of asset protection, not any evasion, if you know what I mean. But
no,
that would
there's nothing wrong
that
with that.
that would stand, right? And
Mhm.
I could still transfer. Let's say that, then, if I have ABC LLC registered in Florida, and let's say that trade name's available in let's say the Virgin Islands, and I just start over there and I sold the intellectual property, the goodwill, all of that over to that entity for whatever amount, then that would basically, because let's just say we deal with a lot of paper here. We don't have a lot of assets in land investing other than, well, Robin might, and some of them when they're actually buying hard money deals. But in the past, it was always, we put a deal under contract and we do a double close. And so we didn't
Yeah.
actually really hold the land or you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So moving forward, you would just say definitely start a new reset. Because if you've already messed it up, we know how not to mess it up in the future, but start over.
Well, it's an option. I'm not saying do that for sure until we were actually jumping into it. And I mean, I'm happy to set up a call with you and dive into it more specifically. But an option would be starting over. You know, if you're already, and I'm not saying you are, but if you're already in a situation with the IRS or someone,
Not yet.
then
No.
that's step one, is deal with that, you know. But yeah, there are options to setting up new businesses and doing it over. Now, just be aware though, if you are setting up a new business and saying, "Hey, I'm going to sell the intellectual property or assets over to this other business," that's a transaction, and it could trigger a taxable event. And so, you know, if you're moving assets from one business to another, where it's a documented ownership, you know, though, depending on the valuation of that, it could create a taxable event. So that's just a conversation that you have with your CPA and figure out.
Would they
What,
BR that? What if you BR'd that company and then it was just a liquidation? I mean, it could be a taxable event, but
yeah, I mean, anytime there's an asset or increase, asset transfer or increase, monetary increase to someone else, I mean that there's a taxable event usually to some degree in those situations.
well, the cost of intellectual property could be a dollar,
Could
couldn't
be,
it?
yeah, especially if you set the value of it. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, great question.
I mean, there's a lot of complexity in all these things, guys. This is like what it is. Like every situation, every history, like all of us make choices in life that brought us there where we are, right? And there's so much complexity. I just like can tell from like my grandpa, he was a really smart guy, right? Like he was this architect and it's like architecture, like all this like a bunch of people working for him, and like he always said to me, Robin, you need three important people in your life, right? One is you need a good wife, right? Start with that. The second one is you need a good doctor, right? That keeps you healthy. But the third one you really want to have is a good CPA, because he will save you a lot of money and take a lot of the headache away. And like on the first view, like the natural instinct of an entrepreneur is I don't want to spend my money on estate planning. I don't want to spend my money on a CPA because like that's all bullshit. I don't want to deal with that. But in the end, they prevent you from making mistakes that cost you like 10x, 20x the amount. And believe me or not, I learned my lesson the hard way, right? So is there any other questions we have? Anything you want to know? Tony's right now here. Okay. With that said, Adam, maybe you want to schedule a call with Tony? Maybe not. Tony, thank you so much. It was amazing having you on here. There was so much valuable information and so much like little nuggets, right? And so much clearance for probably, people ask me a lot of questions around like taxes. People ask me a lot of questions about like trust and entities, and I always say, I don't know. You filled a lot of my gaps today, right? So thank you so much for that. And maybe Paul, you wanna get your book written trust over to Tony for your for his review.
I'll read the same.
I'm
I'll
gonna
read
I'm
the
gonna give
same
it to
book.
him because it's pretty. It's like 20 pages. You get to go online and you get the template of the trust. It's kind of like dummy proof, right? But at the end of the day, I still like to have. And I was gonna pay an attorney to review it, but now I have Tony. So
I
um,
love it.
yeah, great.
Let's
Tony,
do that.
do you know anything about crypto and taxes? Like if you had a lot of gains and then you lost them all, is it like a wash? I mean, we'll talk later, but yeah.
We can talk later. It's a whole new field of taxes when it comes to crypto, and how you bought it, you know, the whole idea of first in, first out, you know, did you actually realize the gains? How do you offset them? When do you offset them? You know, so yeah,
Right.
the IRS is getting more clear on the rules around crypto, more clear now than
Right.
they ever have been. But yeah, I mean, that's a deep dive on how you
Yeah.
bought it, when you bought it, what does it look like, and what are you using it for?
Okay, cool. Well,
Awesome.
nice meeting you. We'll talk soon.
Great meeting
Yep.
all of you guys. Thank you guys all so much. Robin, so good to see you, man. And everybody here.
So good to
Appreciate it.
see you. I gotta give you a call. We need to talk about our trust situation too.
Do
Yeah.
you know? We'll do a book club on Paul's book. We'll read it together.
This is what we do.
There you go.
We do a little
Yeah.
book club, right? Like this is what we is and read to each other, right?
That's fun.
All right.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thanks, guys. I sure do appreciate
Perfect. Have a great evening. Thank you, Tony, for
Rest of
being
luck,
on, and
every.
see everybody soon. Bye bye.